Can you guys hear him purring? Such a magical sound. Huh. Say hi. Say hi. Hi. Oh. Yeah. Blessings and welcome back to my channel. This full moon is going to be in the tropical constellation of Virgo, as well as Hexagram 64, and in the Vedic Sidereal Nakshatra of Purva Phalguni. Before I go into Hexagram 64 and Purva Phalguni, I want to talk a little bit about Virgo and the archetype of Virgo. I'm sure many people already know Virgo as the detail-oriented, analytical, very focused and precise energy. And yes, this is true. Virgo also is connected to the Magdalene archetype. If you're familiar with Mary Magdalene, she is the feminine representation of the counterpart of Christ. And you can even look at the symbol for the constellation Virgo, right? It's a woman. It's the only one out of all of the 12 or 13 constellations which is the embodiment of a woman. And as I mentioned, although the characteristics of being detail-oriented and very precise still do apply when it comes to Virgo, Virgo also represents this feminine intelligence, right? Where I perceive the masculine intelligence, more of a focus of right or wrong, black or white, Virgo is the energy of refinement. So the detail, the focus, this feminine intellect, if you will, doesn't necessarily come from distinguishing things as right or wrong. It comes from refining. It comes from pulling the weeds and organizing and bringing the correct things together in order to create a cohesive whole. So it's almost like it's operating on a different frame, a different scope, a different perspective of evaluating what's right or wrong, right? Or what can be the most optimal expression or embodiment of something. And when I think about Mary Magdalene and the energy of the feminine overall, and what this Virgo, sometimes a virgin archetype represents, there is this purity in the refinement. There isn't necessarily perfection, although it can be a continual leading up to perfection, but the striving for perfection in and of itself has this underlying foundation and the intention of purity and coming from a place of purity, which is kind of ironic because many schools of thought, not many, very few schools of thought have kind of demonized, in a way, Mary Magdalene. But when you look at the truer expression of her archetype and what she represented, anointing the feet of Christ, you know, there's this innate symbolism of bringing a deeper purity and wholeness through the full embodiment of the feminine archetype. Virgo also represents the healer, right? It's the one who is putting in the work and the efforts to give the healing salve, right? The healing balm. And I see these themes playing out really deeply when I look at Virgo and when I look at Mary Magdalene, and I see the greater gifts, the greater healing gifts that both of these energies express and are embodiments of. So in the tropical constellation of Virgo, we also find ourselves with Hexagram and or gene key 64. So from a hexagram perspective, This one represents that which is occurring before completion. And it's funny because it's the last hexagram, right? There are 64 hexagrams. So hexagram 64 is the last one in the series, yet it's before completion. And this before completion implies the never-ending phases, or phase in particular, of cycles. It's the understanding that completion is not here quite yet. And our perception of completion can indeed bring forth, as it always does, right, another beginning of some sort. When we look at it from a hexagram perspective, it's advising us to keep to our goal and keep our focus on what we are wanting to create and do, and be conscious and cautious as well. And not cautious from a place of fear, but cautious from a place of focus and discernment in order to get ourselves to that goal and to that completion, with the awareness that it's just going to be another beginning of some sort. From a gene key perspective, this is the shadow of confusion, the gift of imagination, and the siddhi, which is the divine gift of illumination. And I was listening to Richard Rudd talking a couple months ago, and what he said encouraged me to create my own definition and description of these words. So the words that came to me were, in the place of confusion, cacophony, in the place of imagination, reverie. Love that word, reverie. And in the place of illumination, the lightless light. So what does this mean? Of course, I always want to invite you to come up with your own description of it. You know, when we intuitively try to define these things, you'd be surprised at the accuracy and the relevance that these intuitive definitions have according to the actual description of the gene keys in and of themselves. So first off, we can start with confusion and cacophony. So what is the definition of cacophony? Cacophony is a series of dissonant sounds sounding simultaneously. So you can think of just noise on top of noise on top of noise on top of noise on top of more noise. All in the mind. It's perhaps several different songs trying to be sung simultaneously. And when we look at the energy of cacophony or confusion, it's asking us to continue to move through and be patient with what we might be hearing. What comes to mind is what they often say when people are trying to practice meditating, right? And going deep into these meditative states, you're encouraged to stay in your center, to stay in that point of focus, despite and in conjunction with including all of the noise that's surrounding you. The cars driving by, the dogs barking, your phone going off, right? And this can be akin to sometimes the way that our mental processes work, with all of the things that we have to do and our obligations and the things that we want to do and the random things that come going on through. And this energy is reminding us to stay our course, because clarity, although it's not here yet, it is something that can arise and will arise through and from a place of patience, right? Because eventually the dog stops barking and the cars finish driving by. You know, it's this willingness to sit with confusion, to sit with all the sounds occurring in our mind, in the trust that there will be a tune that will ring so true, that will be so resonant, we can't not hear it. This brings us to the gift, right? The gift of imagination and the word reverie. I love this word so much. I first heard it, in like 2018 in the show Westworld. Do you guys remember that? Yeah. And it just felt so resonant. I didn't even know what it meant. I was like, reverie. And I looked it up. And a reverie is a pleasant musing. It can be the act of being in a calm and peaceful state of daydreaming. It can be a piece of art. It can be a piece of music. It's something that kind of sends you off into a greater space and place in your imagination. Reverie. And do you see the difference between the cacophony and the reverie? It's almost like there's a different focal point internally, right? One is just seeing and hearing the multitude of sounds and stimulation, and the other one is piercing through that. And perhaps using the sounds and the noise which is present in order to create its own greater imaginal realm, right? And this imagination broadens how we perceive and even project the potential of whatever it is that we're thinking about, whatever it is that's evoking that reverie. And when we go to the siddhi of this, as I said, the siddhi is illumination. And the word that I used was the lightless light. I was reading a description about this one earlier, and I read something that had me do a double take. I had to take a moment with it, and it was like, oh, wow, yeah. And the idea is that everything comes from light, right? And this was such an interesting phenomenon for me to try to conceptualize, because the dark is also present, and yet the dark is also woven from light. I'm going to say that one more time. The dark is also woven from light. And when I think about this lightless light, when I think about the light of consciousness, the light of form, the light without the light, and it's different from the human or the mental 5 or however many sensory perception of what light actually is. And this, I feel like, pierces deeper into the potential of what can arise and the wisdom that can arise from this place of illumination, from this greater seeing. In the human design system, gate 64 is connected to the right hemisphere of the brain, and it's a part of the abstract sensing circuit. And the purpose of this gate is to reflect and look back onto previous memories and emotions and experiences in order to ultimately share the wisdom and the perspective which will support the collective evolution of humanity moving forward. It's a cyclical kind of energy, right? It's not logical, but nonetheless it brings forth these insights through reflection and spaciousness and not trying to figure something out, but allowing the information, the insight to come through this process. And finally, Purva Phalguni, which is the Sidereal Vedic Nakshatra that this full moon is falling under, is ruled by Bhaga, and Bhag is the lord of wealth and prosperity. One interesting thing about this nakshatra is that it can be represented by the energy of roots with the intention and the ability to create and start something new. And it can just as well be represented by the process of destruction and demolition, with the intention that the death of the old will seed and can seed the creations of that which is yet to come. So there is a lot of drive to be able to create and to be able to seed the energy to these new creations and these new ventures. Purva Phalguni is also ruled by the planet Venus, and Venus represents love and money, material pleasures, right, and sensory experiences. So with this Purva Phalguni energy, there is a lot of potential to start new business ventures or to buy a lottery ticket, right? If you think about money, and money being a very potent frequency in this material realm. And Purva Phalguni has the initiative and the drive and the naturalness in order to put the energy into really prospering in the material world, and with all things having to do with sensory experiences and sensory pleasures. And it's really interesting is that although these are two different frameworks of astrology, right? Like I said, we have the tropical hexagram 64, and this is a sidereal nakshatra of Purva Phalguni. Nonetheless, I'm not sure if you caught this, but there is a similarity. There's a connection in acknowledging the potential of new beginnings, as well as acknowledging the endings that can lead to the new beginnings, right? Hexagram 64 being before completion, and Purva Phalguni having this creative and this potentially destructive energy. So the questions we want to be asking ourselves during this time: how can I move from confusion into this deeper access of my imagination? How can I discern from the cacophony and take what I need to from the sounds that might inspire me into my reverie? How can I use more of my imagination to explore the potential of what can come? And then how can I also surrender and allow the wisdom and the insight of the lightless light to pierce through? This is also connected to our material comforts and what we perceive to be comfortable, how we explore our sensuality. And sensuality doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. I think it's important to discern that. Sensuality is the way that we sense the world around us, right? It has to do with our senses. It can be the way that you're able to receive or give a hug. It can be the way that you're able to cuddle an animal, for example. The way that you eat your food, right? There are a lot of nuances to this, but it's like, how do you relate to the things that involve our senses? And of course, this energy also has to do with our money and our material wealth and our material foundation. So what refinements do you need to make in order to really get clear on what you want that to look like for yourself? So of course, look at your birth chart to determine where in your chart this full moon will be landing in, what house. For example, I'm a Sag rising, so this is going to be in my 10th house of public image, career, work in the world, how I show up. 10th house represents the very, very top of the chart, right? Where 4th house is like the bottom, home and comforts and the inner self. And yeah, so it's going to be in my 10th house. It's definitely having me revise and refine and reflect in what I want to be doing, and also bringing me the opportunities as well as the energy to determine what's going to be right for me moving forward, right? What I need to close off, what things I can start putting my energy into to begin, and so on. So it's a really fruitful energy. Like I said, look at your chart, see where Virgo, tropical Virgo, is in your chart. It'll give you an idea of what house this is going to be in and how this is going to be impacting you. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence. If you'd like to book either a human design and or a Gene Keys reading, please click the link at the description box below. And if you like this video, please hit the like button as well as subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of the videos that I post moving forward. Sending you grace and discernment, the ability to move from any confusion or cacophony that you might be experiencing during this time into the access of your own reveries, for you to be able to really see into the potential and the magic that can come through to you in regards to this next chapter that we're all moving into. Sending you so much love for this full moon, and I will see you again soon.